Joe Rogan and Russell Brand in this one, giving us a lot to think about. This is actually part 2 of breaking down this episode of the JRE. And so if you haven't seen that first episode, I will leave the link somewhere over my head. This one can stand alone. We're going to talk a lot about spirituality and recovery and psychedelics as per usual. But we're also going to catch up from where we left off, which is the meaningful question in front of us. What is our only hope? What is humanity's only hope? How can we be free to think for ourselves, to live, to forgive, and all the rest? So I'm glad you're here, and stick around till the end, and then let me know if me agreeing with Joe Rogan and Russell Brand as kind of a conservative Christian thinker is totally off base, or if maybe God is up to something and there's a spiritual awakening going on. So let's get into it.
There's something that transcends all physical reality as we know it. It's beyond our imagination.
I love it.
And it is reality.
Yes, we are fetishizing, understandably, the only measurable part of our reality, while knowing even deeply personally for our own subjectivity that there's something else within us. There is our experience of rational thought, there's our experience of bodily sensation, but there's something else within us. I've been unable, of course, because of my recovery to...
Yeah, so he's going to go into some other, his 12-step experience in spirituality, but I just think that that's fascinating, that here we are again on Joe Rogan talking about the need for understanding transcendence. We have to break away from sort of the Enlightenment rationalism. Rationality is great. It's a gift from God, but the rationalism, the only thing that is real is the thing that I can understand and measure and taste and touch and all that stuff. No, there is a metaphysical reality that requires us to have faith. I mean, I know that's like a bad word to some people, but it's like I take what I can see, but that can only get me so far, and I need to push beyond that and realize that there's a lot more to the story. There's a lot more to reality than just what I can see, taste, and touch. It's unfortunate that so many people limit themselves to a naturalistic worldview and cannot open themselves up to a metaphysical or spiritual worldview that would really help them understand the world, or help them explain what they see in the world around them. I think unfortunately it's one of the tricks of the devil, if you will, that just like keeps people looking downward to the material world rather than looking upward and looking heavenly. But that's just me. That's just me.
To get into the sort of psychedelic space when it's, now that it's become wellness and now that it's become acceptable, I've not been able to entertain.
Can you explain that to me? Because I'm not an addict, but I would like to know. What is it about a psychedelic experience that makes you think that if you engage, that you will somehow or another regress, lose all control, start doing heroin, your life is going to fall apart? You're clearly not the same person. You're clearly not the same person, even though you've experienced the same traumas that led you into heroin addiction in the first place. You have clearly gotten a certain control over your life, an understanding of yourself, a personal sovereignty that you didn't possess when you were an addict. So what makes you think that this entheogen, this literal psychedelic connection to a higher realm, would ruin your life?
Real quick, before Russell answers, I apologize for doing that. It does feel bad when I stop them from talking, but this is the format that we're in. So again, they go immediate. So they're talking about transcendence. They're talking about the need for transcendence and the need to understand that there's more to this world than just the physical. But then they go to a physical thing as the key to understand that metaphysical world. They're going to psychedelics, DMT, mushrooms, whatever it might be. So you're still locked in naturalism. You're looking for a naturalistic solution to get outside of your naturalistic sort of cage that you're stuck in. So I just want to point that out. Now, now there is some, I want to point that out without going too deep into the debate of drugs. And then he uses the word entheogen as an alternate word to the word drug. It's a word that means to be possessed by or to be indwelt by the gods or God, entheogen. There's another podcast that he breaks this down. I don't remember if I've covered it or not, but rather than using the word drug, which is an inconvenient word because like caffeine is a drug. I mean, I drank 3 cups of coffee this morning. Maybe I should have drank some more, but so that's a drug. So as a Christian, I do have an issue with that. Like, okay, I'm taking caffeine, you know. I also, sometimes I need help going to sleep. So I take melatonin. Well, that's natural to your body. Okay, well, whatever. So, so the word drug can be a very inconvenient word to use when having this discussion. Joe uses the word entheogen as an alternative, and I think he's trying to make a distinction because of Russell's past as an addict that maybe he wouldn't be addicted to something that's an entheogen because he was previously addicted to things that we call drugs. But we'll let Russell speak for himself now.
Yeah, I know. Because the thing is, I really, really want to. I'm like, when I was still using, I took psychedelics in the same way all kids take psychedelics.
For fun.
For fun, in a park, at a bus stop, you know,
Yeah.
and knowing that there's something ontologically profound happening. Like, most observably, and I'm talking about myself as a 16-year-old, like, hold on a minute, I'm not real. Like, I am not my memory of myself. I am not my projections. I am the consciousness that is observing that set of data. I'm observing my feelings. I'm observing my thoughts. I'm beyond it. So beyond like all that stuff, I was aware that this was profound, but also I was doing it on my...
Sorry, and I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because I have a history that brings back some memories of some things. And so I hear some of my friends through Russell here in this moment. And so it's just, so that's why I'm laughing, not because I think he's ridiculous or anything.
My own with like just kids drinking cider at a bus stop in Essex. I wasn't doing it like with a shaman or a doctor or Aldous Huxley or Terence McKenna or like some Brazilian guy with feathers and stuff. I was like at a bus stop in the rain, in the grimness of Grays where I'm from. So like I've maintained this fascination because I feel, well, I'm a 12-step person, and 12 steps is about that there's a spiritual deficiency that causes addicts to become addicts.
There is a spiritual deficiency that causes addicts to become addicts, that you are taking this drug to try to fill the spiritual deficiency. So what do we actually need to be filled with to actually fill that deficiency? The Spirit of God. That's what we need to be filled with. That's it.
They're looking for something that they can't find in the world. They're looking for connection. They're looking for a deeper purpose and for meaning.
Well, so they're also looking for escape.
Right. This is
escape from the anxiety of being alive. Just the existential angst that most people carry around with them.
Yeah, it's unlivable with. But like as you say, most people carry around with them. Like we all have that. So that's
we all have a certain level of it.
Yeah, and for some reason, the addict type, according to this analysis, and there's only one analysis, and it's the one that I've got clean with, so it's the one I sort of advocate for. It's the only one I'm qualified to advocate for. The principle is, if you replicate, or not even replicate, if you create those spiritual conditions, like you belong to a community, you think about helping others, you're willing to look at what the reasons you drink and take drugs for in the first place, but fundamentally, this is the key thing, is it what it argues most of all, and it's like an ingenious piece of American theology, really, I would say, the 12 steps, 'cause it was informed by William James, the theologian. It's influenced by Carl Jung, of course, and so it's a sort of a fusion of religious and spiritual ideas and psychiatry, which obviously was in a much more formative state back then. And what's fundamentally offering you is the drugs and the alcohol are not the problem. The problem is you are self-centered and egoic. You've got caught in yourself. And so even once you stop drinking and taking drugs, you're still going to have that problem, and you're going to have to address that problem. And when you do, you won't feel the need to drink or take drugs anymore. Now, so what becomes...
I mean, acknowledging that there is a power higher than yourself, that is the way to break that cycle of the ego and you being you're self-reliant, and you have to hit bottom. You have to look up. You have to put your hope and your faith in God ultimately. And I know people will define that differently, and I totally understand that.
in a sense, the abstinence is significant and it's pivotal. You can't drink or take drugs one day at a time. But more important than that is you've surrendered.
Yeah.
You're not in charge of your life anymore.
Right. You've given the ego a break.
Yeah, like it's like I can't run on that.
You know the story of Alcoholics Anonymous, though, and Bill W., the fact that he was into LSD.
Yes, I'm aware of that because I'm sort of an amateur historian of it because it's an important sort of part of my wellness.
It seems like a contradiction.
That dude was out there.
Like
I mean, like he's a prophet. Like the guy was a stockbroker, apparently a womanizer, and yes, indeed, took LSD while in recovery. And of course, all of the materials around that fellowship.
Well, and doesn't that go to the point, right? The drugs are not the problem. It's the person trying to fill that, you know? So yeah, it's this apparent contradiction, but, you know, he just went on this whole thing to say that, no, it's really about you and your person, and why are you relying on those drugs to fill some spiritual deficiency? So here's a guy that, and I'm just role-playing here, maybe he had filled that spiritual deficiency, and so he was taking LSD for some other reason. I don't know. Like, I'm just, again, maybe lending a intellectual thicket to that. An intellectual machete to that thicket is what I was trying to say.
And part of the problem, I think, if you live in a materialistic and rationalistic culture, which is what, you know, as my understanding is post-Enlightenment culture, is about individualism, materialism, rationalism. If you accept those as the driving ideas, then in the end, the only things that matter are the things that you can measure. And there's no doubt that science, technology, medicine are marvelous, magnificent tools, metrics, ways, lenses for observing the miracles of nature and the cosmos. But when they start to drive economic models, you can't make the same claims for objectivity of science when the science is a subset of an economic model. You can't make the same claim. They're only looking at what they're looking at. Who's paying for it? Who's paying for those studies? How are those clinical trials conducted? How much of the information is released? And I think that that's really what the pandemic was a lens that showed us a lot. It showed us stuff that's always happening, but it concentrated it and showed us it in an observable timeline. Normally it's too diffuse and across too many issues. Go, hey, are these guys all cooperating, collaborating and conspiring with one another to ensure that their mutual agendas are being met at the level of global corporate.
So he's talking about the economic structures coming out of that Enlightenment rationalism and naturalism and really and humanism. He doesn't say that, but I would throw that into the mix. And when you have that mix, you have exploitation. I mean, there's no reason not to, because there's no God, there's no real, like, you are an end in yourself. You set morality for yourself. It's whatever feels good for you. If you've got the power, you can exploit the weak and those types of things. This comes from naturalism. And it comes from an evolutionary idea. I know people don't like to admit that, but I actually just put out a short showing that Darwin's Origin of Species has an alternate title, which is The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. I know people who ascribe to evolution don't like thinking of it being connected to racism and the exploitation of the weak by the powerful, but it naturally flows from those worldviews. But it's contrary to a biblical view of humanity. So I would just lend that machete to the intellectual thicket as well.
And I suppose that the reason that I'm fascinated with, you know, spirituality in particular is because that is your private little haven. That is your sacred cathedral within yourself where you do have sovereignty there still. And like, you know, sometimes I worry because the stuff I talk about, you know, I talk about these bloody, you know, global conspiracies, corruption, war, pandemic. And then in my life, I'm like still, you know, an affluent but normal guy. I'm getting, you know, doing a talk at my kid's school or getting kicked out of Legoland for non-compliance at a theme park. I'm not dealing with the bloody WEF on a daily basis. I'm not challenging Klaus Schwab face to face. You know, I mean, I'm living a normal person life. And I'm aware, and I sometimes think, fuck, am I wrong? Am I wrong? But then I talk to people, you know, like either you with the amount of information you've amassed through your own work or, you know, Jeffrey Sachs or fucking Glenn Greenwald or whoever, and you think, oh shit, this is actually true. This is true. And most people's lives, they're living it. They're living like with that kind of adversity. And I've been poor. I grew up without money, so I like, you know, I have the memory of it also. But like, it's not just abstract. This is not just some theory about how life should be organized. This is the slow grind, oppression and centralizing of all resources at a level that's totally undemocratic, that's annihilating people's lives while telling them that it's somehow benefiting people that I don't think it benefits either. I think it's so yeah, it's useful to remember that this is an experiential, actual thing, not just something I do on the internet and talk about. It's, because you go out in Austin, you'll talk to a cab driver that will tell you, oh, all of the music venues shut down during the pandemic. And we can see now what the trends are. We can see now how it's affecting people. And I feel like, well, where is it that people are going to get the courage to change from? Even if is that courage about how are you going to make your life within this system better? Or even, how are you going to participate in challenging and even overthrowing these systems by the great resources that are within you? And that's...
Where are we going to get the courage? That's a really good question.
I suppose one of the things, because I have good faith in people, like mine is not a bad faith analysis. Oh, people are bad, they're selfish. Mine is, no, I think people might be beautiful, even though all the time I know that I do things that are corrupt and I make mistakes and I know that other people have wronged me and all of that. Because I believe in those things we've discussed, forgiveness, I feel like, no, actually, the resources are there. It's possible. It's possible. That's where, for me, the evangelicism lives. And that's why I'm interested in themes and ideas that are not curtailed within any individual culture. And shamanism is a good one because it predates monotheism, it predates nationalism. It was there already.
I think this is a misunderstanding generally. I've heard this before, and what I think there needs to be a distinction, and the Bible does lay this out, that there's God, Elohim, the Lord God. But God is in the midst of a council of heavenly beings. There's these other Elohim, these other gods. And so in a way, some people could look at the Bible, they can look at Christianity and be like, oh, it's polytheism. But it's not really. It's that God sits up above every other God, every other divine being. And so that is a monotheistic idea that predates every other world religion. There's God, there's these other heavenly beings, then there's humanity here in this earthly kind of realm. That being said, there is more to look into on that as far as the history of religion and religious ideas.
And beings have a tendency to seek out mystical experiences, to have a relationship with the divine.
Yeah, and you're clearly right. And humans can be wonderful. We know that. That is one of the possibilities. We just have to figure out a way to make it so that they're encouraged to be wonderful most of the time. And
so the flip side of that is, yes, humans can be wonderful. They can also be evil, terribly, terribly evil. But I do want to connect this to Russell's original question, which is, where are we going to get the courage to push through kind of the tyranny of our time right now, the tyranny of what we're doing? And this isn't a channel dedicated towards politics. This is a channel dedicated towards theology, but how those ideas work themselves out in community. And so how do we push through tyranny? How do we have the courage to say, yeah, like, whatever, take my life, take my things, take whatever, there are people that have gone to prison, died for their beliefs, things like that. And unfortunately, I think we have been kind of conditioned to accept a very watered down version of life and reality, and we have lost that courage to fight for what's meaningful.
We're all capable of being shitheads, and we're all capable of being the best version of ourselves that we can be. But this has to be sort of established as a narrative that you should probably be the best version of a person as you can be. And one of the things you're going to have to do if you want to do that, you're going to have to be compassionate. You're going to have to be kind. You're going to have to be charitable. You're going to have to recognize that people make mistakes, and you're going, if this post-pandemic, you're going to have to forgive people. You're going to have to forgive them. You're going to have to let things go. And you forgive people not just for them, you also do it for yourself.
People. Yeah, that's principles you've described. And I suppose principle is a belief that transcends circumstance. It's not just, I have this principle until it's inconvenient, then I fuck it off and have another principle.
Yeah, and it's
principles of belief that transcend our circumstances. There you are. Forgiveness as a theme, being a good, how is it possible for me? And I should probably, this should be where we land the plane, because I'm afraid that this is getting kind of long. But so how do we come to a place where we can recognize that humanity is capable of great good and humanity is capable of great evil, and then we look at the evil that we experience in ourselves and say, okay, how do I become free of that? I can't do it from myself. If I'm corrupt, any attempt that I make to free myself from that corruption is going to be marred by the corruption that's inside of me. So I need deliverance from outside of myself, which is again why I point to the person Jesus. I don't just do that because I'm a Christian. I do that because that is the only hope for humanity. It's true. That's the reason I point to it. At least, obviously, I can be objective enough to say that I believe that it's true. I think I have really good reasons for believing that it is true. And that is the hope that we have for humanity. How can we free ourselves from the evil that is inside of us? We can't. We need Jesus to free us. And until we do, then we're just talking into the wind. We're just wishful thinking. And so that's my hope for this conversation. It's hard. It's difficult. But it will push us to find answers, and hopefully finding those answers in the person of Jesus. So if you have made it this far, love you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of the community. Build this community up. People are engaging in the comment section, and leave your comment. Just like Uncle Walt Whitman said, the powerful play goes on, and you can contribute a verse. What will your verse be? And I'd love to see those comments and engage with you, and in the hopes that meaningful dialogue is possible around these things. I know this is when we're talking about the apocalypse, we're talking about the evil in humanity, and so hopefully we're ending on a good note here of there is hope. There is hope. It's not just taking psychedelics or freaking self-realization or meditation, even though meditation and things like that are okay for me. Maybe not so much the psychedelics and things like that, but finding that hope and realizing that hope is possible. That's what's wonderful. That's why this is meaningful. So thanks for being here as a part of this, and I will catch you in the next one.